But the black woman is the main calamity as a default of the destruction of the black community. We can look at real statistics. We can look at single marriages. We can look at teen births. We can look at poverty. We can look at who's using the welfare system. And all because black women choose these things upon the race.
He spares no one. He was forgotten, but he was someone.
I declare war. See, it's always these ugly dudes who have such hatred towards black women. These ugly, weak dudes that want to blame black women for every problem under the sun. See, I was taught that a man is supposed to be a provider and a maintainer. A man is supposed to be a leader in his community, in his household, and in his community. A real man doesn't blame women for his problems. A real man is a problem solver. A real man is a builder in his community, not a whiner and a crier like this guy. See, a wise leader taught that powerful people make things happen. Powerful people own problems and they find solutions. Powerful people acknowledge reality and they address the reality. Weak people, weak victims, like this clown, love to blame others for their problems. They love to have an I can't type of attitude, and that's what this guy has. This guy wants to blame black women for every problem under the sun. When we're taught in basic sexual education, when we're in middle school, we're taught about reproduction. We're taught that it takes a man and a woman to reproduce. It takes sperm and an egg to reproduce. Whether the man or the women are promiscuous or virtuous, that is the reality regardless of the situation. So both the man and the woman are responsible for bringing life into this world. Both of them, therefore, are responsible for raising that child that is brought into the world. Both of them are responsible for guiding that child, for providing for that child, for taking care of that child, for educating that child, for making sure that that child goes in the right direction in life. They bear equal responsibility for that. And it is simply illogical to place the burden on one sex or the other when it should be a joint venture, a joint partnership to take care of the family, to maintain the family. Now, this guy says that women are the ones who choose who's going to be the suitor, who's going to be the person that they decide to sleep with. Obviously, a woman has choice. She does make a decision as to who she's going to date, who she's going to marry, who she's going to sleep with. But the man also makes a choice as well. Often the man is the one who initiates the interaction. Men are usually the pursuers. They're the ones asking a woman to dance or asking a woman out or asking a woman for a telephone number. That's what real men do. Usually men are pursuing. And the woman decides whether or not she's going to accept those advances. So there is a mutual and consensual choice made by both parties involved to get involved in this relationship or this sexual activity. So again, there is balance. Both are involved, both consent, both engage in the activity, and both are equally responsible for raising that child. And even beyond just the two people involved, we are all familiar with the saying, the African proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child. So the responsibility of taking care of a child doesn't just fall on the woman who gave birth to that child. It falls on the man who helped produce that child. It falls on the larger community to guide that child. So when we see children go the wrong way, there are so many factors that are responsible for that. The parents, the community, etc. Now people say, well, the woman is the one there, like in a situation where there's a single parent, and the mother is raising the child alone without the man present. They want to say, well, the woman was in charge, so she is solely responsible for the outcome. She bears the burden of the outcome. When again, the child wouldn't even be here if the man didn't engage in sex with the woman. So the man has responsibility as well. Also, the man's presence is vital in the development of the child. By the man being absent, he is having an adverse impact on that child's life. And that impact is just as adverse as the impact of a bad mother raising that child. So his absence is just as detrimental as the presence of a bad mother. Because real men are supposed to provide for their children in every single way. Not just financially. They're supposed to be there morally, emotionally, spiritually. They're supposed to provide protection and guidance. See, when the man is gone, there's no guidance for the boys in the family. They don't have an example of what a man is supposed to do in terms of how a man is supposed to conduct business, how a man is supposed to maintain control over his emotions and conduct himself based on reason and logic. They don't have an understanding of what it means to be masculine. So they have a distorted version of what it means to be a man. Often when there is no guidance, people have distorted concepts of manhood. They take on the idea of being ultra macho, which leads to prison, which leads to gangs and violence and things like that. And also, when they don't have guidance, they think that manhood is measured by how many women they can impregnate or have sex with. They have a distorted sense of manhood. When a man is not present in the household to guide his children, to protect his daughters, when a righteous man, let me put it that way, when a righteous man is not present in that household, there is no one to guide and protect the daughters. There's no one there to check the daughter about dressing appropriately, to tell her not to come out of the house dressed in a loose kind of way, dressed in a revealing kind of way. Without a man there, there's no one there to check the daughter about, wearing clothes that resemble the attire of a prostitute. There's no one there to check her on that. There's no one there to guide her when it comes to dating and how to deal with men. There's no one there to tell her about the games that men play. There's no one there to make sure that she is dating the right type of men. There's no one there to guide her when the father is absent. So that woman that this guy talked about who has all these multiple partners and doesn't know who the father is, usually that wouldn't be the case if there's a righteous father in her life to guide her in the right direction. That wouldn't occur if there was a righteous man, and that's the boy's life or the man's life, to teach him that being a man doesn't mean being a player. Being a man means taking on responsibility and making a commitment. Now, in response to many of the things that I just said, I said some of these things in the comment section to this guy, O'Shea Duke Jackson's video. So in response to that sound logic, this guy tries to come up with an alternative point to maintain his flimsy assertions.
But usually, many of the times, we have an unorthodox situation. What you're talking about is an orthodox situation where a man knows he's the father and doesn't take care of the child. That's right, I agree with you. But you're not going to talk about when a female has been sleeping unprotected sex with multiple men and she doesn't really know who the daddy is. This happens a lot. It's happened in the black community for many years. So much so because the female is so promiscuous, when the female has this baby, we got to depend on somebody like Maury Povich to go through the line and see who is the daddy. So really what we have is in the black community, many of the times we have absentee fathers because we don't know who the father is.
So he says, well, what about the situation where the woman doesn't know who the father is, where there are multiple possibilities of multiple guys that could be the father? And he kind of tries to present this as if this is the norm, as if this is the usual situation when it is not. He is making all kinds of sweeping, unsubstantiated generalizations about an entire race of women. It's simply not true. He didn't cite any statistics to back up this idea that most black women have so many partners that they don't know who the father is. So that's the first thing that I want to make about that. The second point is this. Promiscuity goes both ways. Who are these women sleeping with that this guy is talking about? He talks about these women who have all these multiple partners, but they're sleeping with somebody who also is engaging in promiscuous activity. So that person, the man, is just as responsible for promiscuity as the woman. Promiscuity is a problem in our community, but it's not a problem that lies solely on the woman. It's a problem that plagues the community in general. So it is wrong to place the burden solely on the black woman's shoulders, when black men are celebrated for being promiscuous. Black men are considered to be the man if they have a lot of women. In some communities, they're viewed as the man if they can show off, having multiple women and even multiple children from different women. In some sectors of the community, that's something to be proud of. So the problem of loose sex is a problem that affects men and women, and they both bear the blame for that problem. When a child is born, both of the people involved in the sexual act, they both had responsibility in terms of using birth control or not using it. The man bore responsibility when he decided to lay down with that woman. And I'm not saying that the woman is absolved of all responsibility. No, she is just as responsible as the man. They both were responsible. They both made an irresponsible decision not to practice safe sex. So they both have to bear the burden of having that child, of dealing with the child. They both have to. And it doesn't matter, whether a woman has all these partners or not. At the end of the day, one of those partners that she was with impregnated her, and that one should be responsible for bringing that life into the world. He is just as responsible as that woman, even if she was sleeping around. He bears the burden for taking care of that child as well. All right, so let me address the situation where a man fathers a child without knowing about the child. The situation where the mother has so many partners, she doesn't know who the father is. So the actual father doesn't even know that he has a child out there. So for that reason, he's absent. He's not involved in the child's life. All right, so even in that situation, the father is still culpable to some degree because he decided to lay down with that woman. He knew what kind of woman he was laying down with. He knew that she was promiscuous. He knew that she was the type that likes to get around. He made a decision to get involved with someone he didn't know. He made a decision to get involved with someone that he doesn't regularly communicate with. So he bears responsibility. A man that has sound judgment would not make a decision like that. He would get to know the woman that he's involved with. He would remain in communication with the women that he's involved with. He would not be so irresponsible to select a woman that's all over town, sleeping with any and everybody. He would exercise more discretion and better judgment. And if he found out that a woman that he had been sleeping with was pregnant, he would want to know if he was the father. And he would step up to the plate if he was, in fact, the father. So even in that situation, the man bears some responsibility, and all the responsibility is not just on the woman. Obviously, the woman bears some responsibility. No one's trying to absolve her. She has a role to play. But we can't place the entire burden on the black woman. Now, he also mentioned this point about how black women are single, and that's part of the reason he talked about like 72%. I didn't have time to verify that number, but just assuming that that's true. We have to ask ourselves, why are so many black women single? Many black women don't choose to be single. Many black women are single because black men refuse to commit. Black men don't want to be men. Instead, they want to be boys playing around and playing games instead of making a commitment to a good woman. And it goes both ways. I mean, some women may not be of the caliber that someone would want to, commit to. Like they may not be a quality woman. So for that reason, maybe someone didn't commit to that woman. But my point is simple. Many men do not want to commit to marriage, and many men do not want to commit to a monogamous relationship. And that is partly to blame for the problem where you have so many single women raising kids alone. Now, I just want to bring up a couple of points before, I end this video, and that's this. When this guy places all the burden of the problems in the black community on the black woman, as I said, that's weak. That's the coward's way out. That's the punk's way out of the situation by placing the burden solely on the black woman by not accepting any responsibility for the black man's irresponsible behavior. And even worse than that, such an analysis ignores the impact of the larger society. It ignores the legacy of racism in this country. It ignores the legacy of slavery in this country. It ignores the social economic conditions that create the crime that we see in our communities. This crime that we see in our communities in terms of the violence and the drug abuse and drug dealing and things of that nature, those problems weren't just a result of so-called pathological behaviors or bad decision making or black people just not being socially responsible. Those problems are also due to economic conditions like poverty, like unemployment, like the influx of drugs and guns into these poor communities. When someone doesn't have a decent education, when they are in an environment where the schools are failing them, they end up down the criminal route. They end up doing what they need to do to survive, and they end up selling drugs, and they get caught up into the cycle of violence and the problem of mass incarceration. And mass incarceration as well contributes to the problem of single parent households and the fact that you have so many black men that are gay, that are basically opt out. And you even have these idiots that have started a movement called Men Going Their Own Way. And that's basically some gay stuff as far as I'm concerned. What kind of normal man would want to be without women? But when you have these types of factors, there's no reason why you have. I mean, it's clear why you have all these single parent households, single women and such. But again, I just want to go back to the main point that I'm raising right here is that your analysis where you blame every problem on the black woman just ignores history. It ignores the social economic conditions that plague and afflict our community. Now, you went off on some tangent about child support, which wasn't even the subject of, the videos in question here. But I'll talk about that for a minute. You mentioned the fact that these women, some women don't even know who the father is and they just stick somebody with child support even though they're not the biological father. As anyone who knows anything about child support court knows, when somebody is sued for child support, the first thing that the court has to do is establish paternity. So a man has the right at that point to seek a DNA test to confirm whether or not he is the father of that child. If he's not biologically the father of the child, then he's not responsible for providing for that child. It's just that simple. Now, there are situations where someone may have forfeited their rights without knowing so, and they end up being stuck paying child support even though they are not the biological father of the child. But those situations are not as common as many people would like to think. Most of the time, people have an opportunity to contest paternity. They have the opportunity to get a test to confirm whether or not they are the father. So all that talk about child support really isn't even into play. It doesn't have anything to do with the heart of what we're talking about. And I mean, I could do a whole video talking about child support. And I have done one about a recent case involving child support. If you all haven't seen that, check that out. Obviously, I'm not saying that the child support system is perfect. I mean, it's definitely flawed. I know that very well. There's no question about the flaws in that system. But we can't use the flaws in that system to blame black women for everything under the sun. Now, the last thing I want to deal with is this, and that's this labeling that goes on here on YouTube, where anybody who says anything positive about black women, anybody who makes logical arguments defending black women from nonsensical misogyny, anybody who stands up for black women is labeled as a simp here on YouTube. And I really think that that label is childish. It's not applicable. I'm obviously not a so-called simp. When I think of a simp, I think of somebody who is trying to kowtow to women, to curry favor with women, to date women, or they're buying women things, or they're trying to flatter them in order to win some kind of favor with women or to seduce women. That's not my intention. I'm not on YouTube to try to seduce any women. I'm here to express my opinions about the issues of the day. And I'm certainly not in your comment section trying to win favor with any women, because there are no women in your comment section. All you have is a bunch of misogynistic men going their own way type of crowd in your comment section. So there is no one there for me to try to impress. So that argument is ridiculous. It's absurd. And all it amounts to is labeling to try to intimidate and to force someone into groupthink. And I reject that nonsense.